An ordinary rainy night turns into a nightmare from which one can never wake up. A man saves an unconscious woman in the rain, but the next day, he finds his own name in a place where it shouldn't be. What really happened that night? And why can't anyone who's ever saved him ever come back out again? The rain poured down like the sky was crying. The sound of thunder reverberated throughout the parking lot. The body of a young woman lay still in the middle of the wet road. She was wearing a white dress that was soaked and clinging to her body. Her body was shaking slightly as if she was cold and had lost consciousness. The young security guard standing guard at the entrance hurriedly ran towards her. He shouted for help, but no one heard him. The rain covered every sound, every light, every movement. His hands touched her body that was as cold as ice. He carefully lifted her into his arms. Her face was pale. Her lips were dark green. His heart was beating wildly with worry. He ran to the puddles and the dim light from the electric pole. He carried her into the staff room. A towel was picked up and wrapped around her. The sound of the radio broke the silence. He immediately called an ambulance. A few minutes later, the sound of a siren sounded from afar. The young woman was quickly sent into an ambulance. The security guard quietly stood in front of the room. The rain continued to fall. The next morning, the sky was clear, but his heart was heavy. He opened the news on his mobile phone to check the progress. The first headline hit him hard. Young woman dies mysteriously. Police find some evidence in her bag. His hands trembled as he scrolled down the screen. In the news, there was a picture of a young woman lying motionless in the emergency room. And there was another picture that made his eyes widen. A picture from the surveillance camera in the parking lot last night. There was a shadow of something standing just a few meters away from him. It was tall, covered with a black cloth, blurry in the rain. He remembered that there was no one there. He enlarged the picture to get a clearer look. The shadow's eyes were staring straight at him, as if he knew he was looking at it through the screen. His heart beat faster. His body went cold. A new message popped up on the screen, out of nowhere. Thank you for saving her last night. It's your time. His hands went numb for a moment. He looked down at his phone without blinking. The message disappeared immediately, as if it never existed. He tried to press back, but the screen was blank. His breathing became faster and heavier. It was unusually quiet around him. Even the sounds of birds, cars, and people disappeared. He looked up from his phone. On the mirror, there was a large hand-shaped mist. He looked around. No one was there. He took a slow step back, his heart pounding. In the mirror, he saw the shadow of something moving behind him. The shadow was tall, standing against the dark corner of the room. It slowly but surely moved closer. The sound of wet footsteps hitting the floor was wet, wet, wet. The air was so cold that his breath turned into vapor. His hand shook so much that the phone fell from his hand and hit the floor. He quickly turned around, but there was no one in the room. There was only emptiness and the sound of water dripping from the roof. But on the floor where the shadow was standing, there were black, wet footprints, trailing all the way to his feet. He took a step back, but collided with something hard and cold. A cold hand grabbed his wrist tightly. He turned around immediately. The pale face of the girl from last night was floating in front of him. Her eyes were wide open, but without any spark of life. Her lips moved slowly, muttering softly. "You saw him, right?" Her voice was soft, but cold enough to penetrate her bones. He tried to move away, but his body was stiff. Her hand still held on to him tightly like cold steel. Her eyes were filled with fear. Not fear of him, but fear of something behind him. He held his breath, slowly turning back. In the darkness of the room, there were two red eyes floating in midair. They blinked slowly, as if they were staring at him. Then they moved out of the darkness. A tall figure, covered with a pitch-black cloak. No face, no mouth, no voice. But something in his head was screaming as if someone was shouting at him. "Return the promise. Return the promise. Return the promise." He felt a huge pressure flowing into his heart. The girl let go of him and slowly retreated into the darkness. She didn't look at him again, as if she knew there was no way to help. His heart was beating so fast it was about to explode. He shouted at the top of his lungs. I don't know what the promise was. The thing stopped in front of him. Its shadow swallowed up all the light in the room. Then in the blink of an eye, everything went black. Darkness completely covered it, and there was only one voice whispering close to his ear. But he knows. The whisper was cold like the breath from the grave. He turned quickly in the direction of the voice, but there was nothing. The darkness still covered every direction. He couldn't even see the tip of his finger. In the silence, there were slow footsteps coming from behind. Step by step, clear, solid, like walking in his heart. He swallowed hard, with his breath starting to break. Then, some light appeared on the floor. It was a light from an old lighter that had ignited for no reason. In the dim light, he saw a book lying in front of him. The cover was old black leather, with dry bloodstains at the corner. He didn't want to touch it, but it was as if his hand moved by itself. When he opened the book, there was only one line on the first page. The assistant must pay with precious memories. The images in his mind started to flow back madly. His mother's face, the laughter of his childhood, the dreams of his youth, everything began to fade away, as if they were erased page by page, life by life. He cried out in despair. He tried to close the book, but the more he closed it, the more it opened to another page. Then he saw his own image, standing in the middle of the parking lot last night. But this time, something had changed. In that image, he wasn't the one who went to save the girl. He was the one standing in the shadows. Behind her, two bloodshot eyes stared back at him from the image. He took a step back, his hand shaking, his heart almost stopping. Then the whisper sounded again, this time clearer than ever. You are the one who started it. You are the one who forwarded it. And tonight, it's the other person's turn. The lighter went out immediately, leaving only complete darkness once more. A soft laugh started to come from all directions. A childish laugh, but with a mocking and twisted tone. He started screaming, calling out someone's name casually, but there was no response. He took a step back incoherently, his body stumbling upon something on the ground. When he felt around, he found that it was a radio he had used last night. He pressed it to turn on. It was still working, but there was no signal, no sound, no wave. Suddenly, the radio started to crackle. Unit 27 has been notified of an unconscious person in the parking lot tonight. He frowned. The voice was his own. It was exactly what he had said last night. Then the next voice rang out slowly, coldly. The next assistant will also be coming tonight. He gripped the phone tightly, running out of the room without a second thought. The rain started to fall again, as if adding to fate. He ran through the deserted, silent parking lot, without even a light. Then he stopped immediately when he saw something in the middle of the road. The body of a girl in a school uniform lying still, unmoving. She was in the same position as the girl last night, soaked all over, face pale, unconscious. He stood still, breathing heavily, his legs like stones. Then a voice whispered in his ear again. If you don't help, you will be free. But if you go in, the cycle will not end. His heart was beating wildly. He stood with an unavoidable choice. Stop or step in again. The sound of rain pouring down. He looked at the body of the girl in front of him and knew that this decision would change everything forever. He closed his eyes for a moment, his breath shaking. His heart was beating so hard that he could hear it clearly amidst the sound of rain. The last word still echoed in his head. The cycle will not end. He slowly opened his eyes, looking at the small figure lying still in the rain. Her eyes were closed tightly. Her hair was wet against her cheeks. Her face was pale and bloodless. He took a step. The cold rain hit her body, but inside it was hot. The second step, the voice in his head began to scream, warning him not to come close. But his legs did not stop walking. When he reached the girl, his knees collapsed to the ground. His hand slowly reached out to touch her shoulder. Suddenly, her eyes slowly opened. They were not the eyes of an ordinary child. They were pitch-black eyes without whites or life. Her lips lifted into a slight smile. a smile that looked unnatural and emotionless. She moved slowly, sitting up without using her hands to support her. He immediately retreated, but she spoke in a voice that was not that of a child. "You have done your duty. Now you are part of us." Her figure slowly disappeared into the mist, and where she disappeared, something appeared instead. His own figure, standing in the same pose, smiling in the same way, the pitch-black eyes staring straight at him. The figure moved his mouth without making a sound, but he understood every word. "You have become the next guard." He retreated quickly, his heart beating irregularly. The figure remained still, staring at him without blinking. The rain became thicker, like a curtain blocking the outside world. He turned around to run away, but his legs fell heavy. It was like an invisible hand was holding him to the ground. The screaming wind blew past his ears, numbing them. His body was squeezed by the coldness that did not come from the air, but from within his heart that was being squeezed. The figure walked closer, step by step. The water it stepped on became pitch black like ink. The sound of his footsteps was like a hammer hitting his soul, one beat at a time. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "Let me go. I'm just helping people." But there was no response. Only another voice rang out in his head, a terrifyingly familiar voice, his own voice. "You chose to come in. No one forced you. And now the door is closed." The images around him began to distort, as if a dream was shattering. The lampposts in the parking lot were broken one by one. The lights were flickering so fast that his eyes were blurry. He couldn't see anything clearly anymore. The shadows in front of him started to overlap with his own shadow, slowly merging into one. He felt like his body was being absorbed, like his soul was actually leaving his body. The laughter started to return, but this time it was his own voice. A cold, hoarse, and empty laugh. The world slowly became quiet, until there was nothing left but the light rain. In the darkness of the parking lot, a man stood holding a flashlight, looking around in confusion. He was a new night shift security guard who had just started working today for the first night, and on the ground in front of him, there was the body of a woman in soaking wet clothes, lying still and motionless. The sound of rain hitting the concrete floor echoed everywhere. The new security guard stood still, stunned by the sight in front of him. He stepped closer with hesitation. The light from the flashlight wavered slightly with the rhythm of his heartbeat. The girl was lying on her side, her eyes tightly closed, her lips pale. She seemed to be unconscious, but she was still breathing faintly. He called her name softly and reached out to touch her shoulder. Suddenly, the flashlight in his hand went out. Darkness swallowed everything in an instant. He was shocked, quickly knocked on the flashlight, and looked around. There was not even light from the lamppost. The entire parking lot became a timeless void. His breath began to turn cold, even though it shouldn't be cold. Then in the darkness, the sound of wet footsteps came from behind him. Slow, heavy, getting closer and closer. He slowly turned around and saw a tall figure in a black robe standing a few steps away. Two red eyes stared straight at him. The figure slowly raised its hand, pointing at the lying girl. Then a voice that was not human sounded, hoarse, deep, and penetrated directly into his head. "Make a decision now." The new security guard stood still, feeling an invisible force squeeze tightly around his chest. The girl moved slightly, as if she was regaining her senses. The footsteps were silent, but the silence made everything a few times scarier. He was about to make a decision, whether to help or run away from here forever. His hands trembled, but he still stared at the body of the woman lying still. The rain started to fall heavier, as if urging him to make a choice faster. The figure in the black robe was still standing there, not moving an inch, just staring at him silently with eyes red like the fire of hell. His breath started to run out. His heart beat like a war drum in his chest. He took just one step forward. A voice in his head suddenly broke through. A man's voice, deep and tired. "If you touch her, the cycle will start again." He paused, staring at the woman in front of him. Her face looked calm, as if nothing was wrong. But in his heart, he felt something hidden in the shadows. He asked himself in his mind, if he doesn't help, will she die? If he helps, will he become like someone else? The sound of thunder ripped through the silence. A flash of lightning revealed a shadow behind the woman. The shadow resembled the figure of a man, standing with his head bowed, both hands hanging by his sides, and the red eyes were shining brightly in the shadow. The new security guard began to breathe heavily. He turned to look at the figure in the black robe again, but it was gone. Less than a mist covered everything, and whispers from all directions resounded at the same time. Help her. If you don't help her, she'll die. Help her, then you'll know. He clenched his fists. His footsteps slowly toward the woman's body. Every step he took seemed to have a shadow dragging him closer to the point of no return. He collapsed beside her. His hand slowly reached out to touch her shoulder. The first touch was as cold as ice, and then suddenly her eyes opened, looking straight at him. There was no look, no color, no humanity. Her mouth moved slowly, clearly. You helped me. Now it's your turn. Her words hit him hard in the head. The surroundings instantly stopped, not even the sound of rain. Everything stopped as if the world had frozen. The girl still stared at him with empty eyes. Her lips slowly smiled. A smile that was not human, not of someone who had just survived. But it was a smile that she had been waiting for a long time. Her body began to tremble. Some kind of wave was seeping from the inside out. Her hand raised, holding his hand tightly. Suddenly, a pain shot through his wrist like a fire. He tried to pull his hand back, but he couldn't move. Everything around him distorted. The colors changed. The floor became a black reflection. He couldn't see the end. He felt like he was sinking, even though he was still standing in the same place. The girl spoke again, in a voice that wasn't her own. A low, deep voice that was too deep to be human. You are the chosen one. You will become the bridge to the next. He shook his head hard, trying to deny it, but all his memories began to blur. The images of his family, his friends, his life, were slowly swallowed up by the shadows. Then he heard the laughter again, the same sound he had heard from the man before him, from the shadow that had stood in the rain, from him in the future that would never return. The laughter echoed throughout the distorted dimensions. It was as if his heart was being swallowed up along with it. The young woman was still staring at him, her face smiling coldly and lifelessly. Around him, figures began to appear from the reflected ground. Some were old men, some were young women, some were children, but all of them had empty eyes and the same smile. They surrounded him one by one, step by step. Everyone's voices merged into one. Welcome, the new guard. He screamed at the top of his lungs, his body trembling with fear. But no one heard him. There was no escape, no turning back. The young woman's hand tightened. The pain shot deep into his bones. Then everything went completely silent again. And when he opened his eyes again, he was standing in the middle of the parking lot, under the dim light of a lamppost. The rain was still falling lightly. He was wearing the same security guard uniform, but he felt cold from the inside. No thoughts, no feelings. Just standing silently guarding the parking lot, waiting for the next assistant to step into the same circle. And the voice in his head started to speak. The voice of the young woman. He's here. Help him or let him go. His eyes turned to look at the shadow of the new man, who was walking towards him with a surprised expression. And in his heart, there was no other answer, apart from the beginning of another rainy night. The man walked slowly under the dim light, holding a small bag in his hand. He looked left and right in confusion. The sound of the rain started to fall heavier as soon as he stepped into the parking lot. The security guard, standing silently beside the lamppost, looked at him with calm eyes. His face was expressionless, like a living statue that had forgotten how to breathe. The man stopped walking when he saw the slender figure of someone. The young woman was lying motionless in the middle of the road, soaked all over. He opened his eyes wide and rushed towards her. The same security guard stared at the scene silently. He didn't speak, didn't warn, didn't stop her. He just watched, as if he had done it countless times before. The man collapsed beside the young woman. He touched her shoulder carefully. A gust of wind blew past, extinguishing all the lights around in an instant. The sound of the rain was covered by an unnatural silence. Then the young woman opened her eyes. Slowly, slowly, there was no trace of humanity in it. She stared at him with a smile that contained something that no one could understand. The man slowly moved back, but his gaze was still fixed on her. Her lips moved slightly, with a voice that resounded in his head without real words. "You came late, but in time. It's your turn now." The same security guard stood watching without blinking. He felt nothing anymore. Not shocked, not sad, not afraid. Only one duty remained with him: to watch the cycle continue. The rain continued to pour down without stopping. The icy water drops hit the concrete floor in a steady rhythm. The man was stunned as the woman sat up in front of him. She moved without a sound, without pain or cold. Her eyes stared straight ahead, dark and lifeless. He tried to get up, but his legs were stiff as if they were pinned to the ground. His heart beat rapidly, but no sound came out his throat. The woman reached out her hand. Her slender fingers were soaked in the rain, but they looked like black smoke expanding. He retreated slightly, but could not look away. In his head, soft whispers began to overlap. "Help her. It's my duty. You'll know." He gritted his teeth, his heart trembling violently. In that instant, he saw something behind the woman, a figure standing silently in the rain, looking at him, a pale face, wearing a security guard uniform. And in those eyes, he saw himself reflected back. He was about to become like that. He still had a choice. There was still time. The woman's hand moved closer to him. He closed his eyes tightly, took a deep breath, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "No!" The sound made everything tremble. The black mist around him rippled violently. The woman froze, her eyes moving slightly as if she was shocked. The whispers in her head suddenly stopped, and the figure of the security guard standing behind her began to tremble. He saw it slowly crack, shatter like a piece of glass that had been hit. Some light began to seep out from the crack. A warm light, not light from this world. The woman turned to look at the figure and let out a shrill cry. Her body dissolved into a mist and plunged back into the darkness. The man collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, his eyes wide open, and when he looked up again, the figure of the security guard had disappeared. Only a quiet parking lot remained. The rain had become unusually light. The lights came back on, one by one, one by one. He was still panting, his hands clenched, cold sweat running down his back. Everything seemed to be over, but on the ground in front of him, only one thing remained: a small nameplate soaked in rainwater. He reached out to pick it up. In the dim light, he read the name engraved on it. It was his own name, even though he had never worn that outfit before, even though it was his first night here. His hands went numb as soon as he read the name on the plate, a name he was familiar with, his own name, etched in small, pitch-black letters on a cold iron plate. He stood still in the middle of the parking lot, as if time had stopped. The rain had suddenly stopped. The air was completely silent, as if there was no life left in the world. The street lights were blinking slowly, as if the place was taking its last breath. He slowly looked up, looking around cautiously, but he saw no one. No figure of a young woman, no shadow, not even the sound of footsteps from someone who should have followed. However, a strange feeling still crawled in his chest. It was as if something was hidden beneath the surface of the silence. He clutched the name tag tightly in his hand and started walking back to the security booth. As he climbed the stairs, his footsteps echoed exaggeratedly. The room was still dark, but the door was wide open. He reached out to turn on the light. The switch worked. The light was bright as usual. But as soon as the light covered the entire room, he saw it. On the inner wall, there was a wooden board. On the board, there were small photos neatly arranged. Photos of several men and women, all wearing security guard uniforms. And in each photo, their eyes were crossed out with a red cross. Under the photo, there was a name along with the start date and the end date, the date of each person ending with a rainy night. He stepped closer to see the last photo. His hands were shaking. His heart was beating so hard it almost jumped out of his chest. Because of the photo in the last frame, it was his own picture, smiling faintly, wearing a security guard uniform. Under the picture was his name and the date, starting date, today, and the last date, still blank. He stood still in front of the board for several seconds. His eyes stared at the blank space behind the words, last date, the only point that had not been filled. His hand slowly raised as if it was being pulled by some force. His fingers lightly touched the wooden floor under his name, and then his fingertips felt some moisture. He pulled his hand back. The fingertips were stained with bright red. The paint was still wet, as if it had been written a few minutes ago. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered violently. The thunder roared outside as if lightning was overhead. The rain started to fall again, even more violently. He quickly turned around, preparing to run out of the room. But when he opened the door, what was in front of him was no longer the parking lot, but a long, dark, endless hallway. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling lit up one by one, dragging his gaze far away. Both walls were filled with solid iron doors, lined up without numbers. And at the end of the corridor, a figure stood there, still silent, but staring back at him, without his face being visible, as if he knew he had to walk in, as if everyone had walked this path before. He turned back to look at the room again, but the image on the wall was gone, less than a blank wall, and the sound of rain echoing from far away. He turned back to face the corridor. His heart beat slowly and heavier with every step. As his feet began to enter the darkness, he heard the last whisper, his own voice. Welcome, the next guardian. He walked slowly along the dark corridor. Every step seemed to sink deeper into the endless silence. The sound of the rain behind him gradually faded away. Left was only the sound of his own heart beating in his chest. The light in front of him flickered slightly before becoming steady. As he reached the end of the tunnel, the figure waiting became clearer. It was none other than him, standing in the same security guard uniform, his face indifferent, his eyes empty. The two stared at each other for a moment before the figure slowly smiled, then stepped back, letting him walk past. When he stepped through, everything around him began to change. The hallway disappeared. The sound of rain returned. He stood in the same place, the security booth in the same parking lot. Only this time, everything was calm. The night sky was clear. The lampposts were still. No shadows were hidden. No girl, no whispers, no red eyes. There was only him and the strange silence. He took a deep breath, looked at the cloudless sky. Then he walked back into the fort quietly. He sat down in front of the mirror, looking at his reflection calmly. Something had ended. Something had begun. But the cycle had been closed, and that rainy night became just a quiet story in the memory of a place that no one dared to mention again.